What if the very air you breathe, this invisible substance you equate with life itself, is not a gift, but a slow-acting poison? What if the vibrant, reassuring blue of our sky is not the color of vitality, but the lingering stain of a planetary cataclysm that occurred billions of years ago? We are taught to see oxygen as the cradle of complex life, the engine of evolution that allowed consciousness to bloom. But could this be a profound misunderstanding? This story explores a different possibility, that every breath we take is a quiet echo of a war lost long ago, a war that cleansed an entire world to make way for ours. We ask not who we are, but what we are built upon. Are we the pinnacle of creation, or are we merely the inheritors of a world that was violently silenced? This exploration into deep time is a journey into the quietest, most forgotten corners of our planet's memory. It's a search for whispers in the rock, for echoes in our own biology. If this kind of cosmic mystery resonates with you, and you feel the pull of questions that stretch beyond our own history, consider subscribing to our channel to continue exploring the silent chapters of our universe. Together, we will peel back the layers of accepted truth to gaze upon the possibilities that lie dormant beneath. For our story does not begin with humanity, or even with the dinosaurs. It begins in an age so remote, so alien, that the Earth itself would be unrecognizable, a world that existed under a completely different sky and breathed a different kind of air. Imagine winding the clock back 2.5 billion years into the heart of the Archean Eon. The Earth you would find is a ghostly alien planet. Look up, and the sky is not a familiar blue, but a hazy, methanogenic canvas of pale orange and muted pink. The oceans, stretching to the horizon, are not a deep azure, but a strange, lifeless olive green, their waters heavy with dissolved iron, almost entirely devoid of the free oxygen we depend on. The continents are not the sprawling landmasses of today, but small, black volcanic islands, constantly being born and consumed by tectonic violence. The atmosphere is thick, dense, and suffocating to us, a world where life existed in a quiet, anaerobic kingdom, a silent biosphere that had known nothing else for 1 billion years. In this primordial world, life was a slow, methodical, and silent dance. In the sunless abysses of the iron-rich oceans, vast colonies of anaerobic organisms thrived. They were not individuals in our sense of the word, but sprawling, interconnected networks that formed intricate structures on the seafloor, some stretching for miles. They did not see or hear, but they communicated through a complex and subtle language of chemical exchanges, creating a silent, global consciousness of biological information. This was a planet in a delicate, long-established equilibrium. Its normal was a quiet, dark, and oxygen-free existence, a state of being that had persisted far longer than our own oxygenated world has. It was a kingdom of shadows, perfectly adapted to its eternal twilight. Then something changed. The mystery begins not with a disappearance, but with a sudden, inexplicable arrival. In the shallow, sunlit waters near the volcanic coasts, a new form of life erupted with a speed and efficiency that defied the slow pace of evolution. These were the cyanobacteria, and they possessed a radical new ability. They could harness the raw power of sunlight, split water molecules, and in doing so, they released a waste product of unimaginable toxicity to the established life of the planet. This waste was free oxygen. It began to pour into the oceans and atmosphere like a slow-motion chemical weapon, an invisible poison that would rewrite the destiny of the entire planet and trigger the single greatest extinction event in Earth's history. This event, which science now calls the Great Oxidation Event, was not a gentle transition. It was a biological cataclysm. As oxygen flooded the olive green seas, it reacted with the dissolved iron, causing it to rust and fall to the ocean floor, creating the massive banded iron formations we see today, the tombstones of an ancient ocean chemistry. In the atmosphere, the oxygen attacked the methane, plunging the planet into its first and longest ice age, a deep freeze that lasted for hundreds of millions of years. For the silent anaerobic kingdom that had reigned for 1 billion years, it was an apocalypse. An estimated 99% of all life on Earth was annihilated, poisoned by the very element that would one day give rise to us. In our modern textbooks, the story of oxygen is told as a heroic epic. It is the tale of a planet's transformation from a stagnant, primitive world into a vibrant, dynamic one, capable of supporting life as we know it. The Great Oxidation Event is framed as a turning point, a necessary and ultimately benevolent revolution that cleared the way for evolution's grandest creations, animals, plants, and eventually human consciousness. Geologists point to the evidence etched into the Earth's crust, biologists celebrate the invention of photosynthesis, and the narrative concludes with a sense of inevitability.
We are here because oxygen is here, but this clean, triumphant story relies on a profound silence.
It is a history written by the victors, a story that omits the voices of the vanquished and ignores the unsettling questions that linger in the deep shadows of geological time. The most visible scars of this ancient war are the banded iron formations. Spanning entire continents, these colossal layers of rust-colored rock are the silent tombstones of a world that was. Imagine oceans, not blue, but a sickly olive green, saturated with dissolved iron. As the first oxygen molecules seeped into these waters, a chemical reaction of planetary scale began. The seas themselves began to rust. For millions of years, a constant rain of iron oxide drifted down to the seafloor, layer upon layer, creating a geological record of the planet's slow, agonizing death. These formations are not just rocks, they are the fossilized remains of a planetary-scale poisoning, an archive written in rust that tells of a world's chemistry being violently and irrevocably rewritten. What does it mean to build our civilization upon the remnants of such a colossal graveyard? Before the blue sky, there was a different atmospheric regime, a world shrouded in a thick methanogenic haze that would have painted the heavens in shades of pale orange and dusty rose. Methane, a potent greenhouse gas, kept the young Earth warm and stable, a cradle for the anaerobic life that thrived beneath it. When oxygen arrived, it was more than a poison, it was a world breaker. It attacked the methane, systematically dismantling the planet's thermal blanket. The result was catastrophic. The Earth plunged into the Huronian glaciation, a global ice age that lasted for over 300 million years, the longest in its history. This was not a climate shift, it was a planetary reset, an atmospheric terraforming event that extinguished one world to prepare the ground for another. The ice became a shroud, burying the evidence of the old order under miles of frozen water. And what of that old order? What of the life that was lost? We speak of a mass extinction, but the victims of this apocalypse were not creatures with bones or shells that could leave behind clear fossils. They were a shadow biosphere of microbes, a silent kingdom of anaerobes that had reigned for more than 1 billion years. Their legacy is not written in skeletons, but in faint chemical whispers, subtle isotopic signatures in ancient rocks that are incredibly difficult to find and even harder to interpret. Their world was almost perfectly erased. Science can only guess at the complexity and diversity of this lost kingdom. We are trying to read a library where nearly every book has been burned, leaving behind only the faintest scent of smoke on the surviving pages. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Great Oxidation Event is its sheer, inexplicable speed. Evolution, as we understand it, is typically a slow, incremental process, a gradual accumulation of small changes over vast stretches of time. The anaerobic world existed in a stable, slow-moving equilibrium for 1 billion years, yet the rise of cyanobacteria and the subsequent oxygenation of the planet feel, in geological terms, like a sudden, violent explosion. They appeared and they conquered. Standard evolutionary models struggle to explain this rapid dominance, this seemingly coordinated takeover of an entire planet's biosphere. How could a single group of organisms so quickly and so completely overthrow a system that had been in place for 1/3 of the planet's history? The timeline doesn't feel like evolution, it feels like an invasion. At the heart of this invasion lies a piece of biological machinery of almost unbelievable complexity, the molecular process of photosynthesis. It is not a simple trick. It is an intricate, multi-stage engine involving specialized proteins, light-harvesting antennas, and precise chemical pathways to split a water molecule, one of the most stable molecules in the universe. To find such a sophisticated system appearing so fully formed in the early geological record is deeply puzzling. It is like finding a perfectly functioning clock in a world that has only just learned to shape stones. Where were the prototypes? Where are the fossils of the intermediate, less efficient forms that must have preceded it? The record shows us only the finished product, appearing with an efficiency that seems to defy a gradual step-by-step origin. This profound puzzle has led some thinkers to the very edges of scientific speculation, forcing them to consider possibilities that sound like fiction. One such idea is panspermia, the hypothesis that life, or at least its most complex genetic blueprints, did not originate on Earth at all but arrived from space, carried on meteorites or comets. Could the genetic code for photosynthesis have been an extraterrestrial import? A seed that landed in the fertile waters of ancient Earth and, finding a suitable home, germinated with explosive speed. While dismissed by many, the very existence of such a theory highlights the depth of the mystery.
When conventional explanations fall short, the mind must wander to unconventional places, looking to the stars for answers that the rocks cannot seem to provide. Our own language betrays our bias. We call it the Great Oxidation Event, a name that sounds grand, important, and fundamentally positive. We speak of an oxygen revolution, framing it as a liberation from a primitive past.
But what if this language is a form of propaganda, a story we tell ourselves to feel comfortable with our own origins? From the perspective of the anaerobic world, it was no revolution, it was a holocaust. It was not great, it was an apocalypse. By framing this event as progress, we place ourselves at the pinnacle of a linear path, the rightful inheritors of the earth. But perhaps history is not a line. Perhaps it is a brutal cycle of replacement, where entire biospheres are overwritten, and progress is simply the justification written by whoever is left. This ancient cataclysm is not just a distant historical event, it is written into our own biology. We are utterly dependent on the very element that caused this planetary extinction. We breathe it, we metabolize it, our cells burn it for fuel. Yet at the same time, oxygen is a profoundly corrosive and dangerous substance. It is the engine of aging, the source of free radicals that damage our DNA and degrade our cells over time. Our bodies must produce a constant stream of antioxidants simply to protect themselves from the air we breathe. This paradox lives within every one of us. We are the children of a poison. Our existence is a delicate, lifelong balancing act, a truce negotiated between ourselves and the ghost of a vanquished world that still permeates our atmosphere. Was another path possible? Had the cyanobacteria never emerged, or had they failed? What kind of world might have been born from that silent anaerobic kingdom? Could complex, intelligent life have evolved in an oxygen-free environment, breathing methane or metabolizing sulfur? We can only speculate about the forms such life might have taken: slow, crystalline beings in the deep sea, or vast, interconnected fungal-like networks communicating through subtle chemical gradients. By seeing the rise of oxygen as the only path forward, we may be suffering from a profound failure of imagination. The Great Oxidation Event didn't just kill off most of the life on Earth, it may have also extinguished countless other potential futures for planetary consciousness, futures we can now never know. Ultimately, the story is obscured by the greatest accomplice of all, deep time. 2.5 billion years is an abyss of time so vast it is nearly impossible for the human mind to comprehend. Over these eons, continents have drifted, mountains have risen and eroded to dust, and oceans have opened and closed. The evidence has been buried, melted, subducted, and recycled by the relentless churn of the planet itself. The memory of the anaerobic world has been almost completely wiped clean, not by a conscious act of concealment, but by the slow, indifferent processes of geology. We are left searching for clues in a crime scene that has been weathered by billions of years of wind and rain, trying to hear a whisper from a time when the world itself was a different color. The most tangible evidence of this ancient war is not hidden in some remote, inaccessible archive. It is all around us, etched into the very bones of the earth. These are the banded iron formations, colossal layers of rust-colored rock that stretch for hundreds of miles across continents, from the vast landscapes of Western Australia to the ancient cratons of South Africa. They are, in essence, the fossilized remains of a planetary-scale poisoning. Imagine for a moment an entire world's oceans beginning to rust. As the first cyanobacteria released their toxic oxygen into the water, it reacted with the dissolved iron that had saturated the seas for 1 billion years. The iron precipitated, falling in a slow, constant rain of oxide particles, settling on the seafloor in layer after delicate layer, creating a geological record of the world's final, agonizing breaths. These formations are not mere geological curiosities. They are a direct, physical chronicle of a global catastrophe. Their sheer scale is almost impossible to comprehend. The iron we use today to build our cities, our cars, our entire modern infrastructure is mined primarily from these ancient graveyards. We are, quite literally, building our civilization upon the tombstones of a vanquished world. Each band in the rock, a delicate stripe of red jasper alternating with dark hematite, represents a cycle in the great dying, perhaps a seasonal bloom of cyanobacteria, a pulse of poison followed by a brief respite. It is a timeline written in stone, a silent testament to a chemical war waged on a scale that dwarfs any conflict in human history.
How can we look at these majestic formations and see them as anything less than the scars of an apocalypse? Geologists can read these layers like the pages of a book that tells a story of profound and violent change. Before the Great Oxidation Event, the Earth's chemistry was stable, predictable. The oceans were a reservoir of elements held in a delicate anaerobic balance. The banded iron formations tell us that this balance was shattered. For millions of years, the planet's system was thrown into chaos as the new, aggressive chemistry of oxygen battled the old. The process was not instantaneous. It was a long, drawn-out extermination. The planet didn't simply change, it was forcibly converted. These rocks are the archives of that conversion, a detailed account of how one world's life-giving water was turned into a chemical weapon against it, suffocating it with the very element we now equate with life itself.
Beyond the oceans, the atmosphere itself became a battleground. Before the arrival of oxygen, Earth was wrapped in a thick, protective blanket of methane, a potent greenhouse gas produced by the anaerobic life below. This methane shield kept the young planet warm and habitable, creating a stable climate under which the silent kingdom thrived. The sky would not have been blue, but a hazy, ethereal orange or pink, a permanent, gentle twilight. When free oxygen began to seep from the seas into the air, it launched a direct assault on this atmospheric shield. Oxygen and methane are chemically incompatible. One destroys the other. The result was a planetary-scale reaction that systematically dismantled the Earth's thermostat, molecule by molecule, stripping away the warmth that had sustained life for eons. The consequence of this atmospheric war was an ice age of unimaginable proportions. Known as the Huronian glaciation, it was the longest and most severe period of global freezing in Earth's history, lasting for over 300 million years. This was not a gradual cooling, it was a climatic collapse. As the methane was scrubbed from the atmosphere, the planet's temperature plummeted, and ice sheets began to creep from the poles, eventually shrouding the entire globe in a thick crust of white. Earth became a snowball, a frozen, silent sphere drifting through space. This deep freeze was a direct result of the new oxygenated atmosphere. The poison had not only choked the oceans, but had also broken the sky, plunging the world into a cryogenic tomb and burying the evidence of the former world under miles of ice. What life could have possibly survived this? For the anaerobic organisms, it was an inescapable two-front war. In the oceans, they were being poisoned by direct chemical contact. On the surface, their world was being flash-frozen. Any survivors would have been driven into the deepest, darkest corners of the planet, geothermal vents on the ocean floor, or deep within the Earth's crust, far from the toxic air and the encroaching ice. These are the places where we still find their descendants today, the so-called extremophiles, clinging to existence in environments that are hostile to us. We call them extreme, but perhaps we have it backward. Perhaps their environment is the original normal, and ours, this bright, cold, oxygen-rich world, is the true anomaly, the alien landscape that was built atop their ruins. The victims of this planetary cleansing left behind almost no conventional fossils. They were microbes, bacteria, and archaea, life without bones, shells, or hard parts that could be easily preserved. Their kingdom was a shadow biosphere, its complexity and diversity now lost to the abyss of time. The only clues to their existence are subtle and fleeting, faint chemical whispers in ancient rocks, specific isotopic signatures of carbon or sulfur that hint at metabolic processes different from our own. Trying to reconstruct this lost world is like trying to understand a forgotten civilization based on a single eroded shard of pottery. We know they were there. We know they dominated the planet for 1 billion years, but we know almost nothing of their societies, their ecosystems, or the full extent of what was lost. Time itself has been the ultimate accomplice in erasing their memory. 2.5 billion years is a chasm of time so deep that the planet has recycled itself many times over. Continents have collided and torn apart, mountains have been thrust up and ground down to dust, and the ocean floor has been systematically subducted back into the mantle, melting the evidence of the past. This relentless geological churn has destroyed the vast majority of the rocks from that era. We are left with only a few precious protected fragments of the Archean world, known as cratons. These are the last scattered pages from a library in which nearly every book has been burned. The silence from that era is not just an absence of evidence, it is the result of a near-perfect erasure.
One of the most profound and unsettling mysteries surrounding the Great Oxidation Event is its timing. The anaerobic world had existed in a state of slow, stable evolution for at least 1 billion years. Life was simple, methodical, and in equilibrium with its environment. Then, geologically speaking, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Cyanobacteria appeared, and they didn't just survive, they conquered. They spread across the globe with a speed and efficiency that seems to defy the gradual, incremental nature of Darwinian evolution. How did a single group of organisms so rapidly and completely overthrow a planetary system that had been stable for 1/3 of its history? The geological record doesn't show a slow transition, it shows a sudden, violent, and total takeover. This rapid dominance feels less like a biological adaptation and more like the deployment of a superior technology. The established anaerobic life had no defense against the chemical warfare being waged by these newcomers. The oxygen they produced was not just a pollutant, it was a weapon that dismantled their cells from the inside out. The cyanobacteria, on the other hand, had developed enzymes and cellular defenses to protect themselves from their own toxic waste, giving them an absolute advantage. It was a biological conquest on a microscopic scale, but with consequences that reshaped the entire planet.
Why did this evolutionary leap happen so quickly, and why was it so devastatingly effective? The standard models of slow, random mutation struggle to provide a satisfying answer. At the core of this biological revolution is a molecular machine of breathtaking complexity, photosystem II. This is the specific protein complex within cyanobacteria that allows them to perform the miracle of splitting water molecules using sunlight. It is not a simple mechanism, it is an intricate, multi-stage engine, a piece of nanotechnology perfected by nature, involving precisely arranged chlorophyll molecules, manganese clusters, and a chain of electron transfers that operates with quantum efficiency. To find something this sophisticated and fully formed so early in the history of life is deeply puzzling. It is like finding a jet engine in a medieval blacksmith shop. Where are the simpler, less efficient prototypes that should have preceded it? The fossil record is silent. This sudden appearance of such a complex and powerful biological system has led some scientists to the fringes of speculation, forcing them to ask questions that challenge our most basic assumptions about the origins of life on Earth. If evolution on our planet cannot easily account for the sudden arrival of this intricate machinery, is it possible it did not originate here? This is the core idea behind the theory of panspermia, the hypothesis that life, or at least its most complex genetic blueprints, travels between planets, carried by meteorites or comets. Could the genetic code for oxygenic photosynthesis have been an extraterrestrial import, a seed that fell into the fertile waters of the early Earth and germinated with explosive, invasive force? While the idea of life from space may sound like science fiction, it is a serious hypothesis entertained by credible scientists who are confronted with the sheer improbability of what the geological record shows. The jump from anaerobic metabolism to the high-tech process of splitting water is a quantum leap in biological capability. If this software did not evolve gradually on Earth, then it must have come from somewhere else, a place where life had a longer history to perfect such a design. This doesn't solve the ultimate question of life's origin, of course, it simply moves the problem to another, older world. But it does provide a potential explanation for the sudden, violent, and seemingly unnatural takeover of our own planet's biosphere. This silence in the geological library has forced some to look for the author elsewhere, to consider that the story of life on Earth may have been profoundly influenced by events beyond it. Findings like this remind us how little we truly know. If you're fascinated by these missing pieces of history, subscribing will keep you close to the next revelation. The mystery of photosynthesis is not just a biochemical puzzle, it is a clue that points towards a history far stranger and more complex than the one we are used to telling ourselves. It forces us to confront the possibility that the defining moment in our planet's biological history was not a local invention, but an alien intervention that forever altered its destiny. Our own biology carries the scars and the legacy of this ancient conquest. We are oxygen-breathing organisms, utterly dependent on the very element that caused the greatest extinction in history. Our metabolism, our energy, our very consciousness is powered by burning this highly reactive gas within our cells. Yet this relationship is a double-edged sword. Oxygen is also a slow-acting poison for us. The process of cellular respiration creates free radicals, highly reactive oxygen molecules that damage our DNA, proteins, and cell membranes. This cumulative damage is known as oxidative stress, and it is a primary driver of aging, disease, and our eventual decline. We live in a constant, delicate truce with the air we breathe. To survive in this oxygen-rich atmosphere, our bodies have evolved an arsenal of sophisticated defenses. We produce a constant stream of antioxidants, molecules that neutralize free radicals and repair the damage they cause.
Every cell in our body is engaged in a perpetual war of maintenance, a struggle to contain the corrosive power of the very element that gives it life. This internal paradox is a direct echo of the Great Oxidation Event. We are the descendants of organisms that learned to harness the power of a poison, turning a weapon of mass destruction into a source of immense energy. But the poison's nature never changed. It still corrodes, it still destroys, and our lives are a testament to the complex biological bargain we struck to wield its fire. Think of the language we use to describe this history. We call it the Great Oxidation Event, a name that sounds neutral, scientific, almost benevolent. Some call it the Oxygen Revolution, framing it as a moment of progress and liberation, the dawn of a new, more vibrant age. But this is a history written by the victors. From the perspective of the anaerobic world that was annihilated, it was not great, and it was no revolution. It was an apocalypse. It was a planetary-scale act of chemical genocide that sterilized a world and extinguished 1 billion years of evolutionary history. By framing it as progress, we are simply justifying our own existence, casting ourselves as the rightful heirs of a world that was taken by force.
What if we were to reframe the narrative? What if we called it the Great Oxygenation Catastrophe, or the Anaerobic Holocaust? Changing the words changes the meaning entirely. It shifts our perspective from one of triumphant inheritance to one of solemn contemplation. It forces us to acknowledge that our existence is predicated on the complete and utter destruction of a previous biosphere. The vibrant blue sky we admire, the deep breaths of fresh air we take, become something more complicated. Not just symbols of life, but also monuments to an almost imaginable loss. Are we the pinnacle of evolution, or are we merely the beneficiaries of a successful invasion, living in the quiet aftermath of a war we never knew was fought? The search for evidence of this lost world continues in the planet's most ancient and undisturbed rocks. Geochemists analyze microscopic fluid inclusions in ancient crystals, hoping to find trapped samples of the primordial ocean or atmosphere, time capsules from before the world changed. They drill miles deep into the Earth's crust, seeking pockets of rock that have been geologically isolated for billions of years, shielded from the contaminating influence of our modern, oxygenated world. Each new discovery is a faint whisper from that silent past, a clue that helps us piece together the nature of the life that was extinguished. But the picture remains frustratingly incomplete, a mosaic with nearly all of its tiles missing. Ultimately, the story of the Great Oxidation Event forces us to confront the brutal nature of biological change on a planetary scale. We like to think of evolution as a gentle, creative force, a river slowly carving a path toward greater complexity and consciousness. But the history of our own planet suggests it can also be a story of violent revolutions, of entire biospheres being overwritten like lines of code. The oxygen-based life that we represent was not an inevitable outcome. It was one possible future that happened to win a decisive ancient war. It did so by deploying a powerful chemical weapon, triggering a climate collapse, and wiping out nearly all of its competition. This understanding has profound implications for how we search for life elsewhere in the universe. We tend to look for planets like our own, with blue skies, liquid water, and oxygen-rich atmospheres, assuming these are the universal signs of a habitable world. But perhaps we are only looking for mirrors of ourselves. Perhaps the universe is teeming with other kinds of life, thriving in anaerobic worlds that resemble our own planet's distant past. And perhaps on some of those worlds, the Great Oxidation Event never happened. What kinds of complex, intelligent life might have evolved in those silent, methane-shrouded kingdoms? It is a future our planet once had, a possibility that was extinguished long before we ever arrived. The blue of our sky, then, is not the color of life in an absolute sense. It is the color of our life, a specific brand of biology that triumphed on this particular planet. It is the color of a world remade, a world terraformed by microscopic organisms 2.5 billion years ago. As we gaze up at it, we are looking at the result of a planetary coup. We are breathing the air of a ghost, the residual atmosphere of a cataclysm that paved the way for our own evolution. The silence from that deep past is not empty. It is heavy with the weight of a world that was lost, a world that we can now only try to imagine through the faintest of chemical echoes and the deepest of contemplative questions. To truly grasp the strangeness of this ancient history, we must look for the cracks in the official story. History, whether human or geological, is never a perfectly smooth narrative. It is filled with anomalies, moments that feel out of place, like a single misplaced note in a grand symphony. These are the glitches in the timeline, the artifacts and events that defy easy explanation and whisper to us that the version of the past we have accepted may be incomplete. In the story of life on Earth, the Great Oxidation Event is not just a chapter, it is a profound and unsettling anomaly,
a puzzle piece that seems to have come from an entirely different box, forcing us to question the very picture we are trying to assemble. Imagine archaeologists in the 21st century discovering a fully functional laptop computer sealed within an ancient Roman villa. The discovery would be impossible, shattering our entire understanding of history and technology. It would prove that our timeline is wrong, that a level of sophistication existed that we never dreamed of. The sudden appearance of the complex molecular machinery for oxygenic photosynthesis in the early Earth is a biological equivalent of that Roman laptop. It is a piece of high-end, efficient biotechnology emerging in an era of primitive, single-celled life. It feels too advanced, too perfect, too sudden. It's an invention that seems to appear without an inventor, a technology without a workshop, a solution without a preceding problem. The erasure of the anaerobic world is akin to the burning of the Great Library of Alexandria, but on a planetary scale. We mourn the loss of ancient scrolls containing forgotten knowledge of history, philosophy, and science. Yet what was lost in the Great Oxidation Event was infinitely greater.
It was not just a collection of books that was destroyed, but the entire alphabet in which they were written, the very language of that biology. We are left sifting through the ashes, finding a few charred fragments, an isotopic signature here, a chemical residue there, while the vast interconnected knowledge of a billion-year-old biosphere is gone forever. Its complexity now beyond our ability to even imagine, let alone reconstruct. Consider the development of human writing. We can trace its slow evolution from simple pictograms and accounting marks into the complex cuneiform and hieroglyphs of the first civilizations. It was a gradual process of abstraction and refinement over thousands of years. By contrast, the genetic text for photosynthesis appears in the geological record almost fully formed, a complex language of proteins and chemical pathways emerging without a clear predecessor. It is as if, in the history of human communication, Shakespeare's complete works appeared a week after the first cave paintings. This leap in complexity defies the slow, methodical pace of change we see elsewhere in the evolutionary story, suggesting a different kind of origin story is required. In modern archaeology, the discovery of sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey has forced us to completely rewrite the dawn of human civilization. The existence of a massive, sophisticated temple complex built by hunter-gatherers thousands of years before the invention of agriculture or cities was once thought impossible. It showed us that our neat timeline of progress was wrong. An anomaly in the anaerobic world, a single fossilized structure showing non-biological complexity, would be our Göbekli Tepe. It would be the artifact that proves the Silent Kingdom was not just a passive world of primitive microbes, but something far more complex, something whose capabilities we have profoundly and perhaps conveniently underestimated in our own historical narrative. In the world of archaeology, there is a fringe category for objects called ooparts, or out-of-place artifacts. These are manufactured items found in geological strata where they shouldn't exist, like a metal sphere from a Precambrian rock. While most are disproven, they represent a tantalizing idea that our history is not as we know it. From a purely biological standpoint, the intricate protein engine of photosystem II is the ultimate oopart. It is a piece of nanotechnology of such precision and efficiency that finding it in the primordial soup of the Archean eon is the equivalent of finding a microchip in a dinosaur fossil. It is the single greatest clue that the story of life's slow, unguided climb to complexity might be a comforting fiction. Let us think of the Earth's biosphere as a planetary computer. For over 1 billion years, it ran a stable, efficient, and slow operating system, anaerobic OS. The Great Oxidation Event was not an update or an upgrade. It was a complete and forced reformatting of the entire hard drive. The old system was not just replaced, it was systematically wiped, and every file was corrupted by the new aggressive chemistry. The banded iron formations are the physical evidence of this process, the fragmented, unreadable data of the old world, saved as massive, useless rust files. And we, the oxygen-breathing life, are the applications running on the new system, completely unaware that our existence is predicated on that catastrophic total system wipe. The arrival of cyanobacteria can be viewed through the modern lens of an invasive species. Imagine a pristine, isolated lake with a perfectly balanced ecosystem that has evolved over thousands of years. Then a single foreign organism is introduced, a fast-growing algae or a voracious predator with no natural enemies.
Within a few years, it chokes out all native life, turning the clear water into a toxic soup and collapsing the entire system. This is what cyanobacteria did, but on a global scale. They were the ultimate invasive species. They entered a stable world and through their unique and toxic metabolism, terraformed it in their own image, exterminating the native life not through malice, but through the simple, devastating consequence of their own biological success. Even within our own more familiar history of life, there are moments of baffling speed. The Cambrian explosion, which occurred about 540 million years ago, saw the sudden appearance of nearly all major animal body plans in a geological instant. For a long time, this creative burst defied Darwinian explanation. Now we see the Great Oxidation Event as the original, far more mysterious explosion. It was not an explosion of forms, but an explosion of chemistry, a singular event that rewrote the planet's fundamental rules. If the Cambrian explosion was life learning to write novels, the Great Oxidation Event was the moment it invented an entirely new and brutally powerful language, rendering all previous literature obsolete overnight. Trying to understand the anaerobic world is like being a film historian who is told of the existence of a lost masterpiece of silent cinema. There are no surviving copies of the film itself. All that remains are a few enigmatic still photographs, a single cryptic promotional poster, and reviews written in a dead language.
From these fragments, the historian must try to reconstruct the entire plot, the characters, the emotional tone, and the artistic vision of a work they can never truly see. Our geochemists are these historians, staring at isotopic signatures and banded iron formations, trying to imagine the grand, silent movie of a world that played for 1 billion years before its theater was burned to the ground. The loss of the anaerobic biosphere is like the death of a language. When the last speaker of an indigenous tongue passes away, we lose more than just words. We lose a unique way of seeing the world, a repository of knowledge about nature, myth, and consciousness that can never be fully translated. The chemical language of the pre-oxygen world was just as complex. It was a system of communication and metabolism based on sulfur, methane, and iron. When that system was wiped out, its unique solutions to the problems of life, its alternative pathways of evolution, and its entire worldview vanished. We are left with only one dominant language, oxygen, and we have forgotten that others ever existed. Picture the ancient city of Pompeii, a vibrant community frozen in time, perfectly preserved under a blanket of volcanic ash. The ash, while destructive, was also an incredible preservative, giving us an intimate snapshot of a lost world. The erasure of the anaerobic world was the opposite of Pompeii. It was buried not by a sudden fall of ash, but by the slow, grinding, and relentless processes of geological time. Billions of years of plate tectonics, erosion, and metamorphism have acted like a planetary grinder, systematically pulverizing the evidence, melting it down, and recycling it into new rock, ensuring that almost nothing of that original world could ever be preserved for us to find. Time did not preserve this lost city. It dismantled it, stone by stone. We encounter the legacy of this ancient war in our daily lives through a simple, mundane process: rust. Rust, or oxidation, is a symbol of decay, of neglect, of things falling apart. We coat our cars and our buildings with special paints to protect them from its corrosive effects. It is a slow, relentless process of destruction. And yet, our entire biological existence is powered by a controlled version of this very same process. We are living engines that run on rust. The paradox is profound. We are made of the same fire that consumes our world, a fire first lit as a weapon by a microbe in a primordial sea. Our life is a triumph of harnessing the very force of decay that we see all around us. This collection of anomalies, the impossible speed, the out-of-place complexity, the near-perfect erasure, creates a feeling akin to a glitch in a simulation. It's the unsettling sense that the reality we have constructed for ourselves is based on a flawed or incomplete program. These puzzles in the deep past are the universe's error messages popping up in the code of our scientific understanding, hinting that the smooth, linear narrative of evolution is a user-friendly interface masking a far more chaotic and mysterious operating system beneath. Each anomaly is a crack in the facade, a brief glimpse into the true, strange nature of our planet's hidden history, a history that feels less like a gentle unfolding and more like a series of violent overwrites. Perhaps the anaerobic world is not entirely gone. Perhaps it lingers as a ghost in the machine of our planet. Its faint chemical signatures in ancient rocks are like cold spots in a haunted house. Its memory is encoded in the DNA of the extremophiles that still hide in the oxygen-starved deaths, the last survivors of a fallen kingdom.
And most intimately, its ghost lives within us. The constant battle our cells wage against oxidative stress, the antioxidants we produce to fight off the damage of the air we breathe, this is our internal haunting. We are the house built upon the graveyard, and the ghosts of the vanquished are rattling their chains in the very architecture of our cells. We live our lives in a skyscraper of biological complexity, admiring the view from the top floor. We marvel at the intricate design of our own world, the interconnectedness of our ecosystems, the power of our own consciousness. We are so focused on the gleaming tower that we have forgotten to investigate its foundations. If we could dig deep beneath the surface, past the familiar layers of our own history, we would find that our modern world is built upon the ruins of a far more ancient and alien structure. The banded iron formations are the exposed tops of its colossal pillars, a silent, rust-colored temple to a forgotten god, buried under the weight of our own world. If a probe were to find a crystalline filament on Mars showing complex, non-repeating geometric patterns, it would be hailed as the single greatest discovery in human history, proof of intelligent alien life. Yet we are surrounded by the evidence of a biological event on our own planet, the Great Oxidation Event, that is so anomalous and seems so technologically efficient that it begs for a similar explanation. It is a message in a bottle from a 2.5 billion-year-old ocean. We have the bottle, we can see there is something written inside, but the ink is a form of chemistry we no longer speak, and the message remains tantalizingly, maddeningly, just beyond our comprehension. The problem comes back to efficiency. Nature is a tinkerer, not a master engineer.
Evolution works by making small, clumsy mistakes, and occasionally finding one that offers a slight advantage. It produces messy, inefficient prototypes long before it arrives at a streamlined design. The process of oxygenic photosynthesis, however, appears in the record with the elegance and power of a finished product. It is like discovering that the first ever attempt to build a flying machine was not the Wright brothers' clumsy flyer, but a modern supersonic jet. The absence of prototypes, of the clumsy first drafts, is perhaps the most profound silence in the entire story of life on Earth. Mysteries like these are just fragments of a much larger story. If you enjoy following these hidden clues and imagining what they might mean, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next discovery. Every time we peel back one layer of our planet's history, another, deeper mystery appears beneath it. The questions only grow larger, and the silence from the past only becomes more meaningful. By staying with us on this journey, you join a search not just for scientific answers, but for a more profound understanding of our own strange and unlikely place in the cosmos, a place built upon the forgotten ruins of a world that came before. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for a catastrophic takeover is the silence itself. A gradual, competitive transition between two ecosystems would have left a messy, complicated record. There would be fossils of intermediate forms, evidence of ecosystems where both anaerobic and aerobic life coexisted, a long, drawn-out debate in the geological strata. Instead, the record shows a stark, clean break. It shows the disappearance of one chemical signature and the sudden appearance of another. This is not the sound of a debate, it is the sound of a door slamming shut. The profound quiet from the anaerobic world is not an absence of evidence, it is evidence of an absence, the kind of perfect silence that follows a fire that has consumed everything. The Earth itself is a palimpsest, a medieval manuscript where the original text was scraped away so that a new story could be written on top. Our modern, oxygen-rich world is the new text, bold, vibrant, and covering almost the entire page. But if you look closely, in the right light, you can see the faint, ghostly outlines of the words that were there before. Geochemists, with their sophisticated tools, are like textual scholars using ultraviolet light to reveal the erased story. They are trying to read the lost epic of the anaerobic kingdom, a text that was deliberately scraped away to make room for our own, a story that was never meant to be read again. And so we are left with an unsettling thought that touches every moment of our lives. The anomalies in the deep past are not just abstract scientific curiosities. They are cracks in the foundation of our own identity. We are the descendants of the victors, the inheritors of the new regime. Every breath we take is an unconscious affirmation of that ancient conquest. We breathe the air of the terraformed world, the very substance that cleansed a planet to make room for us. The ground beneath our feet is not just rock, it is the compressed dust of a forgotten kingdom. A kingdom whose silence challenges the very meaning of progress, and whose memory is a quiet, constant reminder that we may be living in the long, peaceful aftermath of a war we never knew was won.
When the trail of hard evidence runs cold, when the rocks fall silent, we are left standing at the edge of an immense abyss of time. It is here, in this quiet space of unknowing, that we must turn to another tool, disciplined imagination. To ask what might have been is not to abandon science, but to embrace the full scope of the mystery. The anomalies of the Great Oxidation Event are so profound that they invite us to consider scenarios that stretch the boundaries of conventional thought. These are not ghost stories, but plausible fictions built upon the bedrock of scientific fact, hypotheses that explore the unsettling possibilities hidden in the planet's deepest silences. What if the story we've been telling ourselves is not just incomplete, but a comforting misinterpretation of a far stranger and more deliberate past? Let us first consider the most intimate possibility, that the anaerobic world was not merely a collection of simple, passive microbes. What if it was a civilization? To do so, we must first discard our human-centric definition of the word. A civilization does not require cities, written language, or opposable thumbs. A planetary biosphere, stable for 1 billion years, could evolve a form of consciousness that is collective, chemical, and geological in its expression. Imagine a global intelligence that did not build with stone or metal, but with metabolic pathways and geochemical gradients. Its thoughts would not be fleeting electrical impulses in a single brain, but slow, deliberate shifts in a chemistry of an entire ocean, a consciousness operating on a timescale of millennia. In this scenario, the crystalline filaments discovered in the Pilbara craton are not just a message, they are a fragment of the mind itself. They could be the fossilized remnants of a vast planetary-scale neural network, a thinking substrate made of iron and sulfur. This was not an intelligence of individuals, but a single integrated consciousness woven into the fabric of the planet.
Its primary function would have been homeostatic, the regulation and maintenance of the delicate anaerobic equilibrium that sustained it. It would have managed the planet's climate, regulated the composition of the oceans, and guided its own slow evolution with a patience we cannot comprehend. Its existence would be almost invisible to us, for its engineering was the world itself. What would a day in the life of such a being be like? There would be no days, only eons. A single coherent thought might take 1 million years to formulate and execute. A slow, deliberate adjustment of methane production to fine-tune the planet's temperature, or the cultivation of a new microbial colony to alter the sulfur cycle in a deep-sea trench. This civilization's technology would be indistinguishable from nature because it was the grand architect of that nature. It would not build monuments of stone that could erode, but monuments of process, stable ecosystems, and self-sustaining chemical loops that would endure for geological ages. Its grandest creation was the perfect, silent, and enduring stability of its own world. Why then have we found no other definitive artifacts, no clear signs of its works? Because we have been looking for the wrong things. We search for the ruins of cities, while this civilization's cathedral was the entire biosphere. We look for tools, but its tools were the fundamental forces of chemistry and geology. It left no broken pottery, for its vessels were the oceanic basins themselves. The profound subtlety of its existence is the very thing that has shielded it from our discovery. Its legacy is written in a language of isotopic ratios and mineral deposits, a history that we have long mistaken for simple, unguided geology. The evidence was never hidden, we simply lacked the perspective to recognize it as the work of a mind. From the viewpoint of this ancient planetary intelligence, the emergence of the cyanobacteria would have been an existential cataclysm. They were not a new species joining the ecosystem, they were a cancer. They were a rogue, chaotic process, a self-replicating plague that introduced a violent, corrosive toxin into the perfectly balanced system. Their rapid, uncontrolled proliferation and the poison they spewed into the water and air represented a direct assault on the mind of the world, a breakdown of the billion-year-old order. The planetary consciousness would not have perceived this as evolution, it would have perceived it as a terminal disease, a fever that was beginning to consume its own body. Is it possible this ancient world fought back? Perhaps the long, drawn-out period of the Great Oxidation Event, lasting for millions of years, was not a slow transition, but a prolonged war. The banded iron formations could be the battlefields, the physical evidence of the planetary mind attempting to neutralize the oxygen poison by precipitating it out of the oceans. It might have tried to alter global chemistry,
to release compounds that would suppress the cyanobacteria, or to shift tectonic plates to bury the burgeoning colonies. But the new life was too aggressive, its chemistry too powerful. The war was lost, and the slow, deliberate mind of the anaerobic world was ultimately lobotomized by a flood of poison. The final outcome was silence. The oxygenation didn't just extinguish trillions of individual microbes, it may have destroyed a singular planetary consciousness, a form of life and intelligence so alien that we can barely hold the concept of it in our minds. The crystalline filaments are its last garbled thought, frozen in stone. What we celebrate as the dawn of our own world may in fact have been the end of a mind vast beyond our imagining. We are living not in a world that was born, but in a world that was conquered, a world whose original intelligence was erased to make way for the chaotic, individualistic, and ultimately fragile consciousness that we represent. But what if the change was not orchestrated from within? Let us explore a second, even more unsettling hypothesis, that the Great Oxidation Event was not a local evolutionary accident, but the result of an external influence. We can revisit the idea of panspermia, but this time we add a layer of purpose. What if the arrival of cyanobacteria on Earth was not a random seeding, but a deliberate act of planetary engineering? What if the genetic code for oxygenic photosynthesis was not a fluke of evolution, but a piece of technology designed and deployed with a specific outcome in mind? This would reframe the event from a natural disaster into an act of ancient interstellar terraforming. Imagine a civilization so advanced that it understands life not as something to be discovered, but as something to be written. Such a civilization might spread across the galaxy not by sending colonists in starships, but by sending microscopic, self-replicating biological machines, von Neumann probes made of DNA instead of metal. Cyanobacteria, with their robust design, their simple needs, and their world-altering metabolism, would be the perfect candidate for such a probe. Their mission would be simple and devastatingly effective. Find a suitable prebiotic or anaerobically dominated planet, replicate, and systematically convert its atmosphere to one rich in oxygen, a far more energetic basis for complex life.
In this scenario, the sudden appearance of the hyper-efficient photosystem 2 is no longer a mystery. It was not evolved, it was designed. It is a piece of biotechnology imported from a place where life had a much longer history to perfect such complex machinery. A single meteorite or a trail of cometary dust carrying a payload of these genetically engineered organisms could have been all it took. Upon arrival in the fertile, sunlit waters of the Archean Earth, the program would have activated. The cyanobacteria were not an invasive species in the traditional sense. They were a biological, terraforming engine executing a function for which they were explicitly created. Why would an external intelligence do this? The motive could be as simple and as dispassionate as a cosmic gardener planting a seed. Perhaps anaerobic worlds are seen as fallow ground, evolutionary dead ends with limited potential for complexity. Oxygen, with its high energy yield, is the key to unlocking a planet's true potential, allowing for the eventual evolution of large, mobile, and intelligent creatures. The terraformers may not have had a specific interest in humanity, but in creating the general conditions, an oxygen-rich atmosphere, from which a consciousness like ours might eventually emerge. We were not the specific goal, but a predictable outcome of the process they initiated. This hypothesis paints a picture of a universe where life doesn't just evolve, it is cultivated. The silence from the stars is not evidence of absence, but perhaps evidence of a different, more patient, and far more subtle method of expansion. The terraformers would not need to visit or communicate. It would simply dispatch its biological probes and let the inexorable power of evolution, fueled by the new oxygen chemistry, do the work over billions of years. The entire process is automated, indifferent, and unimaginably vast in its scope. Our planet is just one plot in a cosmic garden, tilled and planted by an unseen hand long before we ever came to be. If this is true, what is our place in this cosmic project? Are we the intended harvest, the final product for which the planet was prepared? Or are we simply an intermediate stage, a step along a path towards something else entirely? The silence of our creators is unnerving. Perhaps their work is done and they have moved on to other worlds, or perhaps they are still watching from an unimaginable distance, observing their experiment unfold. This would mean that the blue of our sky is not our own. It is the color of a chosen atmospheric template, a sign that our world was selected and remade in a preferred image.
There is, however, a third lens through which we can view this ancient cataclysm, one that is neither internal nor external, but cyclical. What if the history of life on Earth is not a linear progression from simple to complex, but a series of grand, repeating cycles of creation and destruction? In this view, the Great Oxidation Event was not an apocalypse or an invasion, but a great reset, a fundamental, system-wide reboot that was necessary for the planet to enter its next phase of evolution. It was a planetary mechanism for breaking stasis and forcing a leap to a new level of energetic complexity. Let us personify the Earth as a single living organism, Gaia. For over 1 billion years, its anaerobic metabolism was stable, but perhaps it was also limited, a form of life that had reached its evolutionary plateau. From the perspective of the planet itself, this long period of quiet stability might have been a form of stagnation. In order to evolve further, Gaia needed to shed its old skin. It needed a more volatile, more powerful source of energy to fuel the development of more complex systems like multicellularity, mobility, and eventually consciousness. Oxygen was the key to this transformation, a self-generated catalyst for a planetary metamorphosis. In this model, the cyanobacteria were not an outside invader, but an invention of the planetary system itself. They were a tool developed by Gaia to deliberately poison its old slow self and force a transition to a new, more dynamic state. The Huronian glaciation was not an accidental climate collapse, but a necessary cryogenic phase, a deep sleep during which the planet could reconfigure its entire operating system. The mass extinction was a clearing of the slate, a controlled demolition of the old architecture to make way for a new construction. It was a violent, painful, but ultimately necessary act of self-renewal on a planetary scale. This perspective recast the story from a tragedy into a drama of becoming. The anaerobic world was not a victim, but the chrysalis. The oxygenated world is the butterfly that emerged. This process may be a fundamental law of biospheric evolution. A planet first develops a simple, stable biosphere. When that system reaches its limits, the planet engineers a crisis, a revolutionary event that shatters the old equilibrium and allows a new, more energetic system to emerge from the ruins. This cycle of creative destruction could be the primary engine of progress on any living world, the rhythm of planetary life itself. If we accept this cyclical model, it forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question about our own time. We, the products of the oxygen cycle, are now initiating our own planetary scale chemical changes through industrialization and climate change.
Are we, in our ignorance, inadvertently triggering the next great reset? Are we the agents of the planet's next metamorphosis, creating the conditions that will lead to the collapse of our own oxygen-based biosphere and pave the way for a third, post-human age of life on Earth? Perhaps we are not the masters of the planet, but simply the tools it is using to prepare for its next transformation. What would this next biosphere look like? Would it be based on a different chemistry, perhaps silicon? Would it be a fusion of the biological and the artificial, a world where life and technology merge into a new form of planetary consciousness? This hypothesis suggests that our own existence, our entire civilization, may be a temporary and transitional phase. We see ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, but we may only be the catalysts for the birth of a world that will have no place for us, a world that will look back on our oxygen-rich atmosphere as a quaint, unstable relic of a bygone era. Ultimately, this cyclical perspective offers a form of cosmic humility. It suggests that our entire world, from the microbes in the soil to the thoughts in our heads, is just one chapter in an immense, ongoing story of planetary becoming. We are not the end of the story, nor are we its primary authors. We are living within a single, vast, and perhaps finite breath of the Earth. The anaerobic world was the planet's first breath. Ours is its second. The silence that precedes and follows us is not an emptiness, but the pause between these cosmic respirations, a quiet reminder that the cycle of creation and destruction is far larger and more ancient than we are. Each of these speculative journeys, the lost civilization, the external terraforming, the planetary cycle, begins at the same point of departure, the unsettling anomalies in the geological record. They are all attempts to give voice to a silence that feels heavy with meaning. They seek to explain a transition in our planet's history that feels too sudden, too violent, and too absolute to be a simple accident. They challenge the comforting narrative of linear progress and force us to confront the possibility that our origins are far stranger, more complex, and perhaps more violent than we have ever allowed ourselves to believe. The crystalline filament from the deep earth remains the central, silent oracle.
Is it the last thought of a planetary mind? The discarded user manual of a piece of alien biotechnology? Or is it a seed crystal, a blueprint left behind by one cycle for the next to discover? It offers no easy answers. Instead, it serves as a permanent physical question mark, a tangible piece of the abyss. It is a reminder that the world beneath our feet is a library of burned books, a graveyard of forgotten kingdoms, and a stage for transformations so vast they defy our comprehension. As we look up at the calm, reassuring blue of our sky, we are confronted with these layers of possibility. Perhaps it is the color of a hard-won peace after a long and forgotten war. Perhaps it is the color of a successful terraforming project, the atmospheric signature of an alien design. Or perhaps it is simply the color of the current chapter, a temporary state of being before the page is turned and a new sky with a new color is written into existence. The truth, whatever it may be, remains locked in the deep silence of the past, waiting for us to learn how to ask the right questions. Our journey into these speculative realms does not provide us with certainty, but with a more profound sense of wonder. It replaces the simple story of our origins with a tapestry of grand and unsettling possibilities. It reminds us that every breath we take is tied to a chain of events of unimaginable scale and consequence. The air that fills our lungs is not a simple substance, it is a historical artifact, a political statement, a cosmic riddle. It is the ghost of a world that was, the engine of the world that is, and perhaps the seed of the world that is yet to come. This hypothesis, then, is a synthesis of them all, that the universe is far more creative and far more ruthless in its methods of generating complexity than our simple models can account for. Life may be a story written in cycles of conquest and transformation, a process where entire biospheres are the pawns in a game of cosmic evolution whose rules we are only just beginning to suspect. The silence from 2.5 billion years ago is not an absence of a story, but a story told in a language that we have yet to decipher, a story that hints at the true, wild, and awe-inspiring strangeness of our own origins. These threads of speculation, woven from the silences in our planet's stone, do not remain in the deep past. They stretch forward, through the abyss of time, and attach themselves to the very fabric of our present moment.
They change the quality of the light, the meaning of the air. To entertain these possibilities is to fundamentally alter our relationship with the world we inhabit. The ground beneath our feet is no longer just a foundation of rock and soil, it becomes an archive of a vanquished kingdom. The sky above is no longer a simple atmospheric veil, it is a monument to a revolution. Its serene blue, the chosen color of the victors. Every breath we take ceases to be a neutral biological act and becomes a political one, a quiet, unconscious pledge of allegiance to the regime that made our existence possible. This reframing of our origin story has profound implications for our identity. If we are the descendants of a biological usurper, the beneficiaries of a planetary cleansing, then what does that make us? The concept of progress, the triumphant narrative of evolution marching inevitably towards human consciousness, dissolves into something far more complicated and morally ambiguous. We are no longer the chosen children of the earth, but perhaps its most successful orphans, living in a home that was cleared for us by force. This doesn't burden us with guilt, for we were not the perpetrators, but it imbues our existence with a deep and unsettling melancholy. We are the inheritors of a profound and ancient violence, a history written into the very chemistry of ourselves. Our search for life in the universe is also transformed. We scan the cosmos for planets with atmospheres like our own, searching for the biosignatures of oxygen, believing it to be the universal marker of complex life. But what if we are searching for the aftermath of a war? An oxygen-rich atmosphere might not be a sign of life, but a sign of a particular kind of life that has already conquered its world. The Great Filter, the hypothetical barrier that prevents civilizations from becoming interstellar, may not be a future technological challenge, but a biological hurdle in the deep past. Perhaps the universe is not silent because life is rare, but because anaerobic life is common, and the violent transition to an oxygenated world is the true cosmic anomaly. The linear story of progress that has defined Western thought for centuries is revealed as a comforting fiction. We imagine history as a ladder, with our species perched at the very top. But these hypotheses suggest that history is not a ladder, but a palimpsest, a scroll on which one story is violently scraped away to make room for the next. Our entire civilization, with its art, its science, and its philosophies, is merely the current text. We are a single operating system running on planetary hardware that has been wiped and reformatted before. This realization invites a profound humility. Our dominance is not a destiny,
It is a temporary condition, and the forces that erase entire biospheres are still at play, indifferent to our perceived importance. The crystalline filament, that impossible artifact from the deep past, becomes the central icon of this new understanding. It is our Rosetta Stone for a history we never knew we had, yet we cannot read its text. Does it contain a warning? A final testament of the world that was lost? Or is it a blueprint, a piece of the ancient technology that could teach us about a different mode of existence? The possibility of one day deciphering its message hangs over our future. Its discovery implies that we are not the first complex intelligence on this planet, forcing us to ask whether we will be the last. The filament is a quiet challenge to our solitude, a reminder that the deepest alien contact we may ever achieve is not with the stars, but with the ghost in our own machine. This new perspective forces us to look at our current environmental crises through a terrifyingly vast lens. If the planet itself can orchestrate a great reset, as the cyclical hypothesis suggests, then our own impact on the atmosphere ceases to be a simple story of pollution. Are we inadvertently becoming the agents of the next planetary transformation? By altering the planet's chemistry, are we creating the conditions for our own obsolescence, paving the way for a new biosphere that will thrive in the world we leave behind? From this viewpoint, we are not masters of the planet, but perhaps our unwitting tools, the catalysts in a planetary process of creative destruction that is far older and more powerful than our own species. Our very definition of intelligence is called into question. We prize our individual consciousness, our ability to reason, create, and feel as separate beings. But what if the planetary consciousness of the anaerobic world was a more advanced, more stable form of intelligence? A collective, homeostatic mind, perfectly integrated with its environment, existing in a state of quiet equilibrium for 1 billion years. From that perspective, our own frantic, chaotic, and individualistic consciousness might seem like a primitive and destructive pathology. Our greatest achievement might be a regression from a form of intelligence so profound and alien that we have mistaken its fossilized remnants for simple geology. The intimate war our bodies wage against the air we breathe takes on a new, poetic significance. The constant production of antioxidants, the cellular repair mechanisms fighting oxidative stress, this is not just biology, it is a living echo of the ancient conflict.
Our bodies are biological fortresses, designed to harness the power of a corrosive element while simultaneously defending against its destructive nature. Aging, then, is the slow, inevitable victory of the atmosphere over our defenses, the final surrender of ourselves to the ghost of the great oxidation event. We live and die by the terms of a truce negotiated billions of years ago, a delicate balance between the fire that powers us and the poison that consumes us.
We have traveled back across an ocean of time to a world with an orange sky and olive-green seas, a silent kingdom that thrived for 1 billion years. We have witnessed its fall, a planetary cleansing orchestrated by an invading chemistry. The simple, triumphant story of evolution has dissolved, replaced by a profound and unsettling silence. The evidence we have found, etched in stone and rust, does not offer comfort or closure, but instead opens a chasm of questions that challenge the very foundation of who we believe we are, leaving us to float in the quiet aftermath of a war we never knew was won. At the heart of that silence lies the crystalline filament, a message in a bottle from a world that no longer exists. It is the tangible ghost, the final indecipherable word of a lost biosphere. What story does its intricate geometry hold? Is it the grand library of a planetary consciousness, its history and philosophy encoded in crystal? Is it a final, desperate warning, a schematic of the poison that was to come? Or is it something simpler and more tragic, the last fading echo of a mind so vast its final thought was to create a thing of perfect mathematical beauty before it was extinguished? We may never know. It remains a silent monument, a testament not to what we have discovered, but to the infinite depth of what has been forever lost to us, a question frozen in stone. This new history reframes our place in the world. We are no longer the inevitable masters of creation, but the fortunate inhabitants of a home built upon a graveyard. The serene blue of the sky is now the color of a memorial, a beautiful, placid surface concealing an ancient violence.
Our dependence on oxygen is not a sign of evolutionary superiority, but the brand of the victor, a chemical allegiance to the force that conquered this planet. This knowledge does not ask for guilt, but for a kind of solemn reverence, a cosmic humility. We are the children of a cataclysm, and our existence is a beautiful, fragile, and perhaps temporary anomaly, a brief flowering of consciousness in the quiet garden of a world that was once someone else's. And what of the universe beyond? Our search for life has always been a search for mirrors of ourselves, for the telltale blue and green of a world like ours. But perhaps we have been looking for the wrong signal. What if the silence between the stars is not an absence of life, but an abundance of quiet, anaerobic worlds, living in a stable equilibrium we long ago destroyed? Perhaps it is our kind of world, violent, dynamic, and forged in a chemical fire, that is the true cosmic rarity. Are we the template for consciousness in the universe, or are we the exception, the lonely survivors of a planetary fever that most worlds are fortunate enough to avoid? The silence from the cosmos takes on a new and deeper meaning. As you settle into the stillness of this moment, let your awareness rest on the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, in and out. Each breath is a connection to that deep and mysterious past. It is an inhalation of the very poison that remade a planet, the very energy that fuels your own quiet consciousness. The air around you is not empty. It is an archive, a ghost, a story. What does the silence between each breath tell you now? As you drift into the darkness, what whispers can you hear from that other world, the one that was sacrificed so that you could be here, breathing, tonight?